So it is good to be here with you when the world seems to have taken a disastrously wrong turn. And I, like so many others, am struggling to re-enter my life fully. So much of the old life was shut down. For me, the choir was shut down. I'm a ballroom dancer, no more of that. Gathering with friends and so on, so much was shut down. So I've titled my talk this morning, Grace Notes. And those versed in music might already think of those tiny notes that Brian just talked about, written above the primary notes in musical scores. The dictionary calls these little grace notes ornamental, and actually Brian did too, I think. The dictionary calls the grace notes embellishments, not necessary or essential for the real music. Although my focus this morning is not primarily on musical grace notes, it strikes me that they come into the music as a kind of gift from the composer. That is a kind of grace. One dictionary definition of grace is a gift, not earned, not merited, not deserved, not worked for, pure gift. In this way, those small musical grace notes lead to my primary topic for today. That is my notes or reflections on grace. Grace. That's not a word generally thought of as part of the UU vocabulary. It smacks of grace of God, a heavenly power upon which many of us look askance, often the result of earlier negative experiences with mainstream religion. But I heard the word used about a month ago in an alternative context, and it got me thinking about grace again. It was a Zoom poetry reading by two very distinguished poets, now seniors. They were reflecting on their lives and on how they first met as young graduate students in school. They were poets studying at the same university. And now, after long, long years, they found themselves reading together in this Zoom poetry reading. And one of them said, it was grace, really. It was grace, really. The organizer of this program didn't even know the two knew one another. The poet's use of the word grace struck me. It got me thinking again about the meaning of grace, a word I keep coming back to over the years, really. There are kinds of experiences I can find no better name for than grace. Experience number one. I've been struggling for the past 2.5 or so years, actually going on 3 years, I suppose, to find my way in a world that seems to have made this desperately wrong turn. Pandemic, self-isolation, health, money woes, and that horrendous war in Ukraine. The other day, in an attempt to do something to step out of this kind of depression, I was heading toward the ocean on Route 1, north of San Francisco, feeling I could talk to myself. So this is what my life is coming down to. No matter how hard I tried to not feel this way, I kept thinking, is this all there is? When I went around a curve and came upon an entire hillside covered with purple sage, I couldn't not see it It shocked my eyes alive. Those tears of self-pity, which had been threatening to brim over, turned to tears of gratitude. The hillside was simply beautiful, beautiful. And here I was granted to witness such color, such beauty. My thought turned to how lucky I am, lucky to be alive in this time and this place, in this moment of now. The Purple Hill seemed to me to be a gift. I didn't do anything to deserve it. It was an unmerited gift from the universe, call it God, to me. One might call the gift of the Purple Hill an expression of grace, the unmerited love of God. Call it the interdependent web of existence towards its creatures. I certainly felt love welling in me for that hill, and around the next curve, I was given the gift of the Pacific Ocean. I'm reminded of a passage from the book, The Color Purple, many of you may have read some time ago. One passage that always stays with me. It's where Shug is talking to Celie, and she says, "My first step away from the old white man was trees, then other people. But one day, when I was sitting quiet and feeling like a motherless child, which I was, it come to me, that feeling of being part of everything, not separate at all. I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. And I laughed and I cried and I run all around the house. I knew just what it was. In fact, when it happened, you can't miss it." The theologian Matthew Fox writes, "In experiencing ecstasy, we are experiencing what our forefathers in spiritual traditions called grace." Fox lists a variety of what he calls natural ecstasies: the ecstasy of nature, of friendship, of sexuality, of the arts, of sports, of thinking, of traveling, of suffering, of work, of serving. When we get outside ourselves, get outside our own little worlds and connect with the larger world around us through any of these natural ecstasies, we experience ecstasy. A natural activity, we experience ecstasy, he says, and we experience grace. He says the action of a supernatural deity is not demanded. Grace is available to us in the everyday world of here and now. What is required is a breakthrough in consciousness in which we break through the insulation of our individual worlds into an awareness of our connections with all things. Our eyes are opened. We wake up. We see what is all around us, the gifts of the surroundings, the purple on the hillside. A second experience I call breakthrough on the psych ward. The language of breakthrough leads me to this second experience, for which I can find no other or no better name than grace. So after graduating from theological school and before becoming minister in Modesto, I worked at a mental health treatment specialist on a locked psychiatric ward in what was then called Contra Costa County Hospital in Martinez. What I became aware of is that while we, as this therapeutic team, could provide a context which improved the odds for a patient, to break through to an acceptance of self-responsibility and that long path upward in the healing process. So while we could provide a context that improved the odds of a person breaking through. There was something indefinable, something mysterious that actually enabled some people, some patients, to break through while others broke down. Something that enabled some to start an upward move after hitting bottom, while others continued to suffer at the bottom. What we did made a difference, but there was still another ingredient. And the breakthrough did not simply depend on the effort of the patient or the person, on how hard the person worked or struggled. The effort of the person made a difference, as did this therapeutic context. But there was still another ingredient, and I came to call that ingredient grace. It was grace that enabled a person to break through rather than to break down. Grace that enabled a turning, a shift from hopelessness to a perspective of hope. And although we could increase the odds and the patient or the person could work hard, ultimately, something else came into play, which did not depend on the person's effort, a kind of grace. In fact, it often came as a result of letting go. And with the breakthrough came the ability to see the gifts of the surroundings, the grace available in the universe, the natural ecstasies, the love as a power and energy force alive in the universe, its action, everyday life, and our own gracedness. So let's come back in a moment to those little notes that grace the music, perched above the big notes, like a butterfly lighting on the rose. Not embellishment, not ornamental, but an example of the magnificence residing in the simplest things. So sitting in my back patio, I'm offered by that small fenced-in world so many gifts, and not merited, not worked for, not earned, and not asked for, simply gifts. The hummingbird bathing at the mouth of the fish fountain. The early morning sunlight in the tops of trees. My hand, my fingers. The hummingbird's magnificent fanning wings. Gifts offered us by our own interdependent web of existence, of which we are a part. Such beauty inside the simplest, the insignificant things. I hear myself ask myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I hear myself answer, welcome these simple gifts. Make yourself available to receive these simple gifts with grace. Make it a practice to receive these simple gifts with grace. There's a saying that someone asked the wise man Confucius, this thing called the way, with a capital W, this thing called the way, where does it exist? Confucius answered, it is everywhere. It is in the smallest creature, the ant. So I was in my patio the other morning before all of these atmospheric rivers took place. And I was looking things over, as is my custom. I was surprised to see in the corner by the fence a little creature making its way hesitantly, headfirst, down a thin trunk of the bougainvillea. It was only slightly bigger than my fist. Its little pointed pink nose quivering, black ears alert, eyes like bright black beads. It was an opossum baby, fallen from the mother's pouch, mother nowhere to be seen. I'd found baby opossums before in my patio, dead, often riddled by ants, those smallest creatures. This little opossum had made it all the way down to the ground and was snuggling among the skinny arms of the spider plant. I'd already fallen in love with it. I thought it was probably best to leave it alone, let it fend for itself. But then the mental picture of the dead ones reappeared. On Google, it said, little ones should be put in a shoebox on top of an old piece of towel and taken to a wildlife center. He was such a living, breathing, scuttling little creature under my gardening gloves as I captured him and put him into the shoebox, still questioning myself as to whether it was the right thing to do. The man at Lindsay Wildlife Center in Walnut Creek was so nice as he transferred him from the shoebox to the animal cage. He called him Little Dude. The little dude was too small to make it on his own, he said. They would make him comfortable and feed him for a couple of weeks, then release him to the wild. The little dude, that little dude, took me out of myself for at least a little while. I think I was a gift to him, and I know he was a gift to me. The little dude took me out of myself and at the same time enabled me to be more myself. As I re-enter life fully and hopefully with grace on this thing called the way. The voice said, do what you can. I did what I could. Thank you.